Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me a moment. Let's go ahead and make sure everybody can see that. Give it a minute. All right. If anybody can't see it, please let me know. So my name's Gina, Gina Di Giusto, and I am a senior attorney with Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. We're a legal nonprofit. Our main office is in Oakland, but we do serve the entire state. And we work on a number of consumer debt and credit issues. And one topic that comes up often for us has to do with identity theft and scams and cleaning up the aftermath of what happens when someone is scammed or has their identity stolen. So we do get questions about this quite a bit. And I'm assuming for those of you that are here today, either you have personally dealt with this or you work with folks who have been victimized in some way. You know, victims of consumer scams and identity theft, I tend to see them more in certain vulnerable populations. For example, a lot of my clients tend to be seniors, but we live in a very interconnected world, which means that we're all at risk of having someone take our information without our consent. And so the point of today is to help you flag it, either for yourself or someone you're helping, and more importantly, what to do to clean it up or deal with it if it happens. I want to encourage everybody, just a reminder, please drop in questions as we go along. I really think it helps the conversation because I'm sure many of you have questions about something that you've seen. So drop in questions as we go along and I'll do my best to answer those questions. And then definitely check out the resources that were provided in connection to this presentation. I tried to put in sample letters and instructional handouts, things that I think you will find very helpful if you are going through this or you are helping somebody. Okay, let's rock and roll. Okay, so first we're going to talk about consumer scams in general, and then we'll move into identity theft. They're slightly different issues, but in general, consumer scams are when someone tries to take your information or get your information, coax it out of you in order to collect personal information to use it for some other purpose, or more likely, they're just trying to get money out of you. And the schemes that we see, they change so often. I've been with HERA for over 10 years, and I have seen many different, very creative scams along the way, and they're constantly evolving. So it can be difficult to give a full list of here are all the scams that happen, and here's what to watch out for because they're always evolving. But what's interesting, and for those of you who are super curious, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they keep a website of scam alerts. So they try and if they get complaints about specific scams with a certain amount of frequency, they will add them to the scam alert website page. And you can see kind of what's happening right now or seems to be happening across the board with more frequency. So if you're super curious to see what's happening now, I recommend you check out the FTC's website because it's always very interesting to see what patterns are out there. Historically, scams tend to fall into these categories or some variation of these types of categories. So one of them is charity fraud, which is scammers pretending to be from a legitimate charity or nonprofit in order to solicit donations or some type of funding from someone. I had a client once who I was doing a house visit for a case, and she had a whole binder of all of these little certificates that she had gotten from places that were alleged nonprofits or charities, thanking her for her donation. And it was just the thickest binder I'd ever seen. And half of them I could tell right off the bat weren't even legitimate charities. And so We don't see them as often anymore, but they're still out there. One thing to know is that uh, a lot of charities or nonprofits or companies in general will share information if you sign up. So the way that this particular client got contacted so often is that she donated to one charity and then they sent out a blast list of her information to all these other charities, and they realized, oh, this is somebody who gives. And so they all started sending her solicitations. So sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes it's not. It's worth looking into that particular charity. Or if you're helping somebody who's more vulnerable, like that client where I flagged it, where I thought she's sending out a lot of money, maybe that she shouldn't be, it's worth flagging. Another scam that we see traditionally is out there are healthcare scams. So that can look like someone using the coverage that someone else has for certain health benefits. So I've had somebody personally, I've had come across this where I had someone who went to a senior fair, and there was a trailer that was offering free health evaluations, getting blood pressure checked, what have you. And in order to participate, they had to provide their healthcare card, and they would, whoever was running that trailer would go and scan the number in the back and then manage to get hold of some sensitive information by offering to provide quote unquote free health checks. And so there was a little bit of cleanup after that, but it can be in a number of settings. It doesn't necessarily have to be that type of setup, but the point is people using the healthcare services that someone else has, their coverage, cover their own needs. Another one that we see a decent amount of time is IRS scams. So this comes up in a few different ways. Sometimes we see it where someone pretends to be from the IRS, where they say they're calling from the IRS and someone owes money and that they're trying to get you to pay over the phone. So what I like to tell clients when I hear about those is the IRS does not have time to call you if you owe money. They will send you something in writing. You will not be receiving phone calls from the IRS. That is a scam. The other way that this often will come up for IRS scams is someone will attempt to file tax returns, and they'll get a notification that someone already filed taxes under their name for that year. So we can see that, usually in the spring when people are doing their tax returns. Others we see are investment scams, which there's a wide variety of investment scams over there. I think a lot of them that have come through lately are the cryptocurrency scams or investing in new businesses. I have seen those recently. So if someone's reaching out saying, here's this great new investment and you're going to make a ton of money back, those always make me a little bit nervous when someone's telling me about those. Home repair scams, also another big one that we see quite often in our office. It could look something like someone showing up at your door saying, we have these extra materials from another job and we're willing to do it, sell the materials at a discounted price or do the work at a discounted price. Or they will say something like, you're eligible for a free government program that pays for these solar panels, and all you have to do is go through us. And then they never properly install panels or set them up. We get so many solar panel cases, it's shocking. And I see so many ads for solar panel cases out there that I wouldn't be surprised if a number of you have also run into this, or people coming around the neighborhood about solar panels. We get a lot of those. We still see a number of lottery or sweepstakes scams that come through, people being told that they won something. I unfortunately had another client where she was told she won a lottery and they even sent her a scammy check that ended up bouncing. It was very complicated, but it still happens. People thinking that they won something, even if they didn't submit their names to be eligible for any type of lottery. And then imposters. This one we see with so much variety, anything from, I've had people say where they thought that they were getting calls or emails from a family member who called and said, "Hey, I need you to send me some money. I'm in trouble. Can you wire me something?" Or to what probably most of you have seen is phishing emails pretending to be from companies that maybe you do legitimately have accounts with. I think I get at least one fake Amazon email per month, pretending that either there was something wrong with my card on my account or some issue came up with Amazon. I see that so often. And so because I know that I get a lot of those spam emails, but because I legitimately have an Amazon account, what I will do to see if it's the legitimate company or not is I will hit the forward button to see who the sender is, because usually when emails come in, it will look like they will label it in a way that it looks like it's legitimately from the company. But if you hit the forward button, you can see what email it actually came from. And almost always it's some scammer looking email, and it's pretty easy to figure out if it's legitimate or not. A few others that I have recently discovered that I think are interesting and worth sharing about. And again, at the end of this presentation, I'll leave room to chat and to talk and answer questions. I'd be very interested to hear about some of the other scams that folks are seeing. But one I have heard about recently is that I guess there's some new apps out there that will allow you to call a number, but mask your number and make it look like it's coming from a different number than what you're actually calling from. And so it gets people to answer the phone or think that they're talking to someone legitimate. So I heard this in that they can make it look like it's coming from a police department or from a family member or from your own house. They can mask the phone number and make it look like something else through this app, which is kind of terrifying and horrifying. So it's people get really creative. Scammers are very, very creative. So just be aware that they're out there. Be aware that these problems are happening, just so that you're protective of your information. Okay, so some of the ways you can flag this stuff for yourself or for others is, number one, if an offer sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I tell clients, if you're told that you won the lottery and you never paid for a ticket, probably not in something that's legitimate. The other red flag that I warn people about, this is probably the top flag in my opinion, is anything that's time sensitive. If someone calls and says, you need to make a decision today or right now, you have to give me an answer on the phone right now. This is a limited option. Send me your information right away. Send the money immediately. Anything that makes you feel pressure time-wise is always a red flag in my book. It is both a scammer tactic, but also a sales tactic, or a debt collector tactic. It makes people feel like they have so much pressure in order to act quickly, which prevents you from really thinking through what you're doing. And so time sensitivity is always a big flag in my book. Anything legitimate will give you the time to think about it, get back, sign up, that kind of stuff. Another flag is that a scammer will want private information, such as social security numbers, your financial information, insurance numbers, healthcare numbers, etc. So a few things on this. First, there's almost never a legitimate reason to give a social security number over the phone. The only times you're going to legitimately need to provide your full social are for things like you're starting a new job and they need your social for getting you enrolled. You're enrolling in healthcare coverage. You're applying for a line of credit. Very, very limited situations. So usually if you already have an account and you're checking on the status of something, for example, let's say you're checking on the status of a loan. At most, lenders are only going to ask you for the last 4 digits of a social, and usually you're the one calling them. I would not recommend, if you ever get a call from anybody and they're soliciting you, I would not provide private information. There are very few instances where you should be handing out your full social or full financial information. Sometimes I see this in the form of scammers will say they'll call and pretend they're from, for example, a bank or a fraud unit and say, we want you to verify who you are. They make you feel like you have to prove to them that you are who you say you are. And so they'll ask you to rattle off your account number or your birth date or any of that information to verify yourself. But really all they're doing is collecting that information that you're freely giving because they're pretending to be from a legitimate source. So be careful with that information. And then another flag would be that they only accept, if you're being asked to send money, that they're asking for money in forms that are immediate and difficult to trace. So wire transfers, reloadable debit cards or those prepaid cards, cash, anything that the money comes immediately. I think the prepaid cards that you see at the stores tend to be the top way that scammers will ask for information. They'll have people say, I need you to go and buy a bunch of cards and then read me the number. Once you've paid for the prepaid card at like Target or the grocery store, I want you to read me the code on the back of the card. Because once they have the codes on the back of the card, they can immediately take the money and walk away. So they want something that's immediate and hard to trace. The other thing that I see a question here. Someone had mentioned about receiving FedEx or UPS packages from Amazon, even though the account is not closed. Or the account is closed. Yeah, a lot of those, they're testing your information. They're trying to figure out if you're there, if you're paying attention, if they can use your information. If it doesn't feel right, do the gut check. If it doesn't feel right, there's a chance it's a scam. So be very guarded with your information. Let's see. Okay, some more flags. Investment offers with guaranteed returns. Anything where they say guaranteed always makes me nervous. And this comes up not just as investment returns, but I see this also when, for example, people who are struggling with their credit or carrying a lot of debt. I will see a lot of companies guarantee that they will improve credit scores by a certain amount or guarantee that they will settle debt accounts on behalf of that consumer, targeting people when they're most vulnerable, they're in a financial bind. We see these a lot. So frankly, you'll probably see a lot of commercials late at night. People are up fretting about their finances. There's somebody who comes on the screen who says that they guarantee to help you out of this bind. And that's often how people kind of get roped in to these fake services. The other flag that's worth noting is when a scammer or seemingly a legitimate company approaches you and they ask for an entire payment up front. It's not always a guarantee it's a scam, but it's definitely a red flag. If someone's offering to do repair work for you, provide some service for you, it's usually a red flag if they ask for all the money up front. Some services it's completely illegal to ask for an entire payment up front. For example, because we do a lot of financial services work and we're helping people in foreclosure, a lot of scammers that we see have to do with pretending to help people avoid foreclosure. For a small fee, they'll help them evaluate them for applying for what we call foreclosure avoidance options. And that's actually illegal to charge an upfront fee for those services. So upfront fees, always a red flag in my book. Others would be changing contract terms after work's already started. Those bait and switch situations. You hire someone to do something, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, we've got all these additional costs that we had not mentioned whatsoever, and we have to keep going, and the costs keep increasing. That's a red flag for a scam. One that's probably not as relevant anymore is when a company that you're working with or you're thinking about hiring, if they don't have a number or address in a local telephone directory, we don't see directories that much anymore. But what is relevant is, do they have a website? Does it look legitimate? Are there individuals identified on the website that you can check their licensing information? Do they provide licensing information freely? That is the type of information that I would care about if you're thinking about hiring certain companies, which goes to the next point of, are you working with someone in a licensed field that's not licensed to complete the job? A lot of contractors without licenses or attorneys without licenses, people who offer services that should be licensed who aren't, that's a red flag. And then anybody who intentionally provides false information. That I think is self-explanatory, but that's kind of the nature of scammers, is pretending and putting out false information in order to gather your personal information or your money. So this could be something where they sound legitimate. I had my poor father-in-law, he got a call who's someone who said they were from the sheriff's office, that he had a traffic ticket he didn't pay, and that the sheriff was coming to arrest him. That's completely false. You cannot be arrested for a traffic ticket, and he shouldn't have to be providing, information with his credit card over the phone, and the sheriff is not going to show up at your door. But, that scammer is hoping that they get on the line with someone who's just vulnerable enough to believe it. So be on your guard. Okay, so what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? Here are a few things that are worth sharing and doing yourself. Number one, take your time. As I said before, it's a red flag if someone is making you feel rushed. It's always a good idea to take your time and think through what you're doing. Do not immediately respond to offers, emails, anything. Really think it through and do your research. However you're comfortable doing it. Most people today have access to the internet, will do Google searches or like to go to the Better Business Bureau. I recommend for clients that I'm working with who get a lot of scam notices, especially if they're collection notices, I let my clients send me notices that they get in the mail or online, and I'll take a look at them and let them know if I think that they look like scammer emails or not. Do reach out to your resources. Get details for things in writing. I think this is I say this as an attorney and when we're trying to help people clean things up. If you think that you're thinking about hiring someone to do something, or they're giving you an offer for something, I strongly recommend that you don't just take their word for it. Try and get whatever it is that's being offered in writing. If someone calls and offers something, ask them to send you a verification email or send you paperwork in writing through the mail so you have time to digest it and evaluate it. Also, if it goes south, you have something in writing to point to. I think that's just sound advice across the board. Another way you can investigate if you think there's potential scams is there's numbers out there specifically for example, for healthcare scams. You can call 1-800-Medicare. For investment scams, the Department of Business Oversight has a number. The SEC has a way to check a database for potential financial statements of a company. I mean, there are ways of doing your homework. And if, for example, you're working with someone who's not tech savvy, or maybe you're not tech savvy, reach out. Our office, our services are free. And we're happy to help people navigate to avoid scams as well. Collecting information, asking questions, verifying answers is very important. So one thing that I do see often is someone will give a phone number to call or an address or email to use saying they're from a legitimate company. What I recommend to people is don't use that phone number necessarily. If someone's calling and saying they're from Bank of America, when you call back, use the number that you know is correctly associated with Bank of America. Go online and find their main telephone number, or go down to the local branch and go to the legitimate source. Don't take for granted that someone may be handing out false information to you. Again, do not hand out sensitive information. Don't pay with cash or money that can be easily transferred and hard to track. Talk to someone you trust. This is where I think many of you who work with families or work with vulnerable populations, this is where you can come in handy. is that you can become a trusted source. If you're sensing that someone is going through financial difficulty and the cause of it is because they got roped into some type of scam, or if they're thinking about doing something, you can be that trusted person that helps them think through, is this something that I should be doing? Is this something I should be signing up for? I got this offer in the mail. Does this look legitimate? It's talking to people you trust, whose judgment you trust, that can be very, very helpful against guarding against scams. And then, like I said, online business rating sites, the Better Bureau, Business Bureau tends to be the most popular, but any site, even Yelp, reviews can be helpful in evaluating if something is legitimate or not. Okay, so that is scams, trying to get your information or trying to get money from you very quickly. Which one of the things that can happen if a scammer manages to get your information is that you then become a victim of identity theft. It's not always correlated, but often is. So what is identity theft? Identity theft is when someone either uses your personal identifying information or pretends to be you in order to use accounts or spend money in your name. So the way that it's not always you sending information to scammers. Unfortunately, thieves can take your information through many sources, including data breaches, which probably all of us have received some notification of a data breach. Shoulder surfing, if you're sitting at a coffee shop using the free Wi-Fi and someone's kind of looking over your shoulder, watching what you're doing, watching what passwords you're using PIN numbers without guarding your PIN number when you're at the grocery store, all of this can be used to take your information. Stolen mail is a big one. Although I tend to see this hand in hand with the next one. So family members or friends can often take your information. Unfortunately, identity theft happens in shockingly high degrees around family members and friends. When you get your information stolen, a lot of times it's within your own home or people you know. I get a lot of clients who again, seniors, they have grandkids living with them or staying with them who go into their purse and pull out credit cards or steal information. And the reason I said this goes hand in hand with stolen mail is someone who has access to your information may sign up for an account and then knowing that the billing statements are going to come to the address will often steal the mail or still steal the bills related to those accounts out of the mail so that you don't catch on that you have had your information used. So if you frequently have your mail stolen or have an issue with mail, it's definitely worth addressing because that often can result in identity theft. Online spyware or keyloggers, that can be very easy way for thieves to steal your information. I see this often when someone says they went on to what they thought was a legitimate site to purchase something, and there's spyware in that website or on that account, and their information got stolen because they made a purchase on that site that wasn't particularly safe, or paper documents. So if you really think about it, you know, your information is out there in all sorts of locations, at your dentist's office, your doctor's office, at an attorney's office, at your real estate agent's office, at the bank. Your information is everywhere. And depending on who is handling your information, there's always the risk that someone will have access or gain access to your paper documents, or even at your home. I don't know how many of you are out there locking up all of your sensitive information. You know, probably all of us have some paperwork out there that we probably shouldn't have floating around the house. And if someone breaks in and steals your information, it's there for the taking. So just being aware that that information is out there is important. And so what happens? Well, someone who has stolen your identity will either open up a new account, so a new credit card, a personal loan, an auto loan, any new credit account in your name, or they will use your information pretending to be you. So use cards that you already have or ATM cards that you already have, medical services you're entitled to, phone plans that you're on, tax refunds or benefit payments that you're supposed to receive. They can take those amounts from those accounts as well. So what do we do? First, we start paying attention. If you see any of the following, this is where you start to flag, I think I might be a victim of identity theft. These are the things that I would, if you see any of them, I would strongly recommend you go through the steps laid out for the rest of the presentation just to make sure, because these are ones where I think it's enough there that you should go through the protocol. So, for example, if you see withdrawals from your bank account that you can't explain, locations, I've had someone where they flagged that a car was rented in a state that they hadn't even been to. That's a big red flag that someone is using your information. If you stop all of a sudden getting your bills or other mail, that can be a red flag that someone is using your information, especially if you know, for example, certain bills come at specific times of the month and you notice that they're not coming. That's worth flagging. If merchants refuse your checks, let's say you know that you have funds in an account and you go to spend, not that a lot of people are using checks these days, but even debit cards. If merchants are saying that you lack funds when you know you have them, that might be an indicator that someone has been using your funds without your consent. A big one that we see in the office that I would guess a lot of folks have seen is debt collectors calling about debts that aren't yours, saying that you owe money and it's a company you've never even heard of. That is an indicator to me that someone may have used your information without your permission. The next few would be medical related items. So if medical providers are billing you for services you didn't use, you got a bill for an ambulance ride, you never even got injured, or you your health plan is saying that they're rejecting your claim because records show you already used your benefit limits, and this is the first time you've tried to make a claim this year, and you know that you couldn't be beyond your limit. Maybe someone's using your account and you didn't know it. Or a health plan that won't cover you because medical records show that you have a condition that you don't have. So someone's saying they're in their records, they're saying you have a condition you know you don't have. Maybe somebody else is using your information. Like I mentioned before with the IRS, we get a lot of people who call who say the IRS notified them that a tax return was filed in your name. That will come in writing, but it's the IRS flagging that there's an issue, and there are things that can be done. Now, the interesting thing is, probably because it's so common, is that the IRS, there are specific forms that you can fill out with the IRS in those situations. So if in that particular case, if you're seeing or have experienced an IRS notification where a tax return was filed in your name, that is one where you would probably want a little bit of extra guidance, calling our office and getting help, because those take some extra forms to sort out, but we're more than happy to help you with that particular situation. And then the last one, which I think is the most common, is that you get a notice in the mail that your data was compromised. So I think the majority of the country probably got the notification about a few years ago, Equifax breach, or I have gotten them from my old college or an old dentist's office. Anytime where information might have been compromised, we'll get those notices. That tells me it's at least worth checking to see if your information was put at risk. Okay. And just so you know, I promise I will go through all of the comments and questions to make sure I didn't skip anybody, so that I answer everybody's questions before we end today. All right. So what do we do? We've gotten very depressed now. We've talked about a lot of things where we think we don't stand a chance and our information's at risk. So what do we do? Here are the things, here are the steps you should be taking to be proactive and deal with it. So number one, read your statements, read your bank statements. I know, and I am also guilty of this, that I do not always check my billing statements that come in. I get them. Do I always look at them? Probably not. But one thing I like to do is I do scan them as much as I can. And the other thing I do, depending on where you do your banking, is that a lot of financial services providers will let you sign up for things like getting phone alerts or text alerts if, for example, your credit card or your card was used online. So I do that with my cards where if my card was used online, I'll get a little alert that lets me know. Usually it's me buying something I probably didn't need to purchase, but it was me. So it just lets me know when my card is being used online. And that's one way to protect myself, force me to pay attention a little bit more. Another thing you should be doing is reading your explanation of benefits for all of your healthcare services, just making sure that what you're being billed for was legitimately used by you. And same thing with bills. If you get bills from creditors, debt collection companies, even PG&E, just make sure that you're seeing charges that you know belong to you. And if you don't recognize them, flag them and address them. Don't let them slide. And then most importantly, check your credit report. This is probably the most important thing that you can do because scammers are typically taking your information and either, like I said, signing up for some type of credit or using your information that's related to your credit. And so credit report can really help you flag these issues and get on top of the problem. So for those of you that don't know this, you are entitled to pull your credit report once per year for free from each of the three major credit reporting agencies, which is Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. There was a period of time because of the pandemic that they were letting you pull your report once a week for free. I don't think they have extended that any further. I think that ended at the end of last year, but you still get at least once every 12 months. So for example, if I pull my credit report from Equifax today, then next January, what is it, 9th, I can pull my Equifax report again for free. And it's important to note that this does not ding your credit. You pulling your own credit report is not going to hurt you. It's what we call a soft pull, meaning it's just for your information. It's not because you're applying for a line of credit, so it will not ding your score. And I strongly recommend that you use annualcreditreport.com, which I have provided the information for on this slide. The reason why I point people to that website, you can get any of the major three credit reports off of that site. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion are all available on annualcreditreport.com. That is the website that is sanctioned by the FTC, FTC approved. And so it's the safest site. You do not need, because you don't need to pay, you don't need to be pulling out a credit card. If you are pulling out a credit card to look at your credit report, you've done something wrong. You've gone to the wrong place, or you're pulling the wrong report. Should never require a credit card. There are a lot of sites out there that like to pretend to be like annualcreditreport.com. Or the other thing I hear a lot of people use is Credit Karma. Credit Karma is not a scam. It's fine to use. The reason why I don't recommend necessarily using Credit Karma over Annual Credit Report or pulling the actual report is that Credit Karma is a summary report. What that means is it takes information from the three bureaus and summarizes it for you, but they don't always show you the full picture, or there will be stuff on your Credit Karma report where it will not specifically indicate which report it came from. So I find it harder to address things when you only check Credit Karma. It's much better to pull the original source. So the original Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion report, in my opinion, is the better way to go. Okay. So here are the things, if you pull your credit report and you're trying to flag identity theft, these are probably the top 4 ways that you can flag it on your credit report. The first one is that you see a lot of unknown names, addresses, or contact information. So at the beginning, when you pull a credit report, the top section is almost always your identifying information. Every address you've lived in for however long, the dates usually when you lived in those addresses, phone numbers associated with you, all the names that you've ever used in order to apply for a line of credit. So any variation of your name you typically use, that's where you'll see it at the beginning of the report. If you see a lot of phone numbers you do not recognize, or addresses you do not recognize, or names you don't recognize, that is definitely a flag that there might be a case of identity theft. Not always, because there are situations where it wouldn't be the case, which we will talk about because we're going to do a practice slide, but it's definitely a flag. The other red flags on a credit report that are worth looking for is that on your credit report, it will list all of the accounts that are open in your name. So you will see things like all the credit cards accounts that you have open, or loans that you have taken out, or student loans that you have. If you see line items or credit accounts that you know you did not open, those are definitely worth addressing, because there's a strong chance that you are a victim of identity theft if you're seeing those open accounts. The other thing that's worth checking is there's usually underneath that section of your credit report a portion where it says accounts and collections, or accounts not in good standing. Those debt collection accounts can also be because someone opened up an account or used money, maybe used one of your accounts that you legitimately have, but racked up this huge debt, and now debt collectors are involved and you know you didn't use the account. That can also be an indicator on your credit report. And then the last indicator, which I think not a lot of people think about, but it's worth doing, is that at the end of your credit report, there's almost always, at least for the three major bureaus, there's always an inquiry section, or sometimes they call it the credit pull section, where it will tell you all of the different instances in the last few years where you have applied for some type of credit or line of credit. And that is a excellent way to flag potential identity theft, because even if a scammer doesn't successfully open up an account in your name, the inquiry section will let you know when someone even just submitted the application. Maybe it was denied, but someone submitted an application in your name. The one caveat with this is that if you look closely at that inquiry section, you're going to see it actually split into two categories. So there's a difference between something called a hard inquiry or a hard pull, and a soft inquiry and a soft pull. Hard inquiries are where you've actually applied for credit. That is where you're going to find identity theft. However, the soft pull or soft inquiry section, that section is not an indicator of identity theft. Soft inquiries are, you're going to see in instances where, for example, when you pull your own credit to see your credit report, that will show up in the soft inquiry section. You didn't apply for credit. It's just showing up because you pulled the report. Or if you see, oftentimes we'll get solicitation notices from banks or other creditors where they'll say, you're eligible for this great promotion at this credit card at this low interest rate. And you get some type of solicitation to sign up for a credit account of some form. Usually those solicitations are a result of a creditor doing a soft pull of your report to kind of see what your financial situation looks like, and then they send you an offer. Again, that is a soft pull. You did not proactively apply for that account. That will not hurt you. It doesn't hurt your credit score, and it is not an indication of identity theft. However, hard pulls and hard inquiries, if you see applications there for credit that you did not submit, that is definitely a flag and worth checking. Okay, let's do a little break things up for a few minutes, because I know that this has been a lot of information. So let's pretend that you're looking at someone else's credit report. You're helping somebody and they show you the report, and the information section, the personal information section on the first page has this. Throw in the chat some of the things that you see on this particular slide that would make you think, I wonder if there's a situation of identity theft here. Go ahead and throw it in the chat. Take a look at the slide. See if you can flag some of the indicators that I would probably circle and ask that person about if I were looking at this particular credit report. Take a stab at it. So I see a comment about multiple social security numbers. I'm seeing comments about several names. And there's at least one more in there that I'm wondering if someone, no birth date with multiple names. There's at least one more in there. I'm wondering if someone might flag. I'll give you a couple more seconds to kind of parse through it. Okay, I don't think someone's flagged this one, but I'm going to flag it for you. And it's not necessarily, so yeah, someone's onto it, the empty position title. So the thing that I probably would have flagged about this person, maybe not so much these days because everybody's working remotely, but I probably would flag the fact that this person is from New York or is in New York, but their employer is the University of Texas. Up until very recently, you probably wouldn't see somebody working remotely having a job at the University of Texas if they're living in New York. So that's the other thing that I probably would flag on this one. So yes, excellent job, folks. Thank you for the ones that participated. So a couple things, seeing all these different names. Now, sometimes you'll see variations of that person's name, and it is in fact them. So in this case, it could be a few things. It could be a case where this person used different variations of their own name to apply for lines of credit. So it's worth asking them about because it's not necessarily that their identity was stolen. It could be somebody who's transgender who maybe they have used names or variations of their names because they transition, and it will appear because they used both types of names. Again, if you're comfortable with that person, just making sure that that's not an instance of identity theft. But it can also be that there's something called a mixed file. Credit bureaus aren't perfect. Sometimes they mix up people's credit files as well. So it could be that two individuals with relatively similar names, their files got mishmashed together, but it's worth investigating just in case. So I'm glad that you all saw that. Now, one thing that indicates to me that this is maybe a credit mix up is because this person has a middle initial that switches. So there's a Joseph Q and a Joe Y. So the middle initial flip-flops a lot. That tells me that this might be a mixed file, but it's good that you flagged it. The other thing is the multiple social security numbers. So here's the thing. It's not impossible to see multiple social security numbers on a credit report, but it's unusual. The scenarios where you're going to see multiple socials would be in certain circumstances where, for example, a married couple applied for, let's say, a home loan together. Sometimes you'll see your spouse's social on your credit report, or you were a co-signer, the socials might show up. But unless you know that you've applied for a line of credit or you're a co-signer and you recognize the other social, that is a big red flag. So I'm glad that you're paying attention. So I will sometimes ask someone, if I happen to see an account and I see multiple socials, I will say, do you recognize this other social? And 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10 so far, it's been a spouse or somebody that they co-signed for. All right. So here's what we do. It's really 3 steps. If you're a victim of identity theft, it's 3 steps you're going to need to take. And we're going to talk about these at length in the next few slides. It sounds more simple than frankly it is because it's a lot of work and most people complain about it. This is where you can be so helpful. If you're helping someone go through this and cleaning up identity theft, your assistance in these 3 steps, it will make a world of difference. So the first step we're going to talk about is making a fraud alert with the credit bureaus, then checking all of your credit reports and flagging the issues that we've discussed, and then creating an actual identity theft report. So let's talk about each of these steps. So first is doing a fraud alert. So let's say that you did the work, you were paying attention, you opened your billing statements, you opened your bank statements, and you saw one of the red flags that we had talked about. And you think that someone may have opened up an account in your name. The first thing you should do is contact the 3 bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, at least one of them, and say you're a victim of identity theft, and ask them to put a fraud alert on your credit file. What a fraud alert is it's just flagging your account so that if someone continues to use your information to try and open up additional credit accounts, it alerts potential creditors that there's an issue with your file, that they need to take an extra step to verify that the person applying for the account is actually you. It doesn't prevent the credit files from being opened, but it's enough to alert creditors that there's a problem there on your account and they need to be vigilant. I often will get asked, what's the difference between a fraud alert and a credit freeze? So the difference is that the fraud alert is just letting creditors know, hey, you should probably double check on this person. They've been victimized. So just make sure it's legitimately that person. A freeze is what it sounds like. They freeze your account. It is not possible to have accounts opened in your name if your credit is frozen. And typically, in order to do a credit freeze, the 3 bureaus will require you to pay like a small fee in order to have your account completely frozen. It requires you to do some extra verification. And what happens is, the reason why a lot of people don't do the credit freeze is that not only are potential scammers unable to open accounts because your file can no longer be pulled by anybody, but that includes you. So if you know that you need to open up a credit account, or maybe you have to apply for a job that requires a copy of your credit report or a credit pull, if you have a credit freeze, that's going to prevent that from happening. So if you do decide to do a credit freeze, then just be aware that it takes time to go alert the credit bureaus to unfreeze your account, to open it up, to allow those things to happen. So I only would recommend that in very severe cases. Otherwise, a fraud alert should be sufficient for alerting creditors that there's a potential problem. A freeze is a pretty severe solution, and you really have to pay attention and keep track of your information. I had a client once who did a credit freeze, and then she forgot all of her password information and didn't have a phone number that they could verify. And it was a big mess to try and unfreeze her account. So you got to be really careful with those. Okay, back to this. Step 1, calling the bureau and saying, can you please do a temporary fraud alert on my account? This particular type of fraud alert, it's only temporary. It's only going to stay on your report for 90 days because it's the initial step. We'll talk about how to get a prolonged fraud alert, but this is one, it's just a starting place, because you don't want scammers to continue opening up your accounts while you're taking the next few steps to clean things up. So fraud alert. If you alert one of the bureaus, they're supposed to contact the other bureaus and let them know that there should be a fraud alert. So I should be able to contact TransUnion and have them confirm that they're going to contact Equifax and Experian, for example. If you want to be really diligent, go ahead and call all 3, but at least one, and ask them to alert the other 2 bureaus to put a fraud alert on your account. Okay, do I see a question? Can you put a fraud alert on your credit file as a safety measure? So there are, and can you continue the restart fraud alert? So there are, excuse me, there are a few different types of fraud alerts that you can do. For example, service members can put certain types of alerts on their account if they know they're going to be in active duty and be away, and they don't want someone to be able to, a creditor to open up an account while they're away because it's clearly not them. That is something you can do, but the free fraud alerts that we're talking about are only available to somebody who's a victim of identity theft. It's not for just anybody. Now, some of the bureaus will allow you to pay for a service where you can do a fraud alert, even if you're not a victim of identity theft, if you just want them to be extra cautious or alert creditors. But it depends on the bureau. You'd have to look in and see if that's a current service they provide, and that usually costs money. But the fraud alert for identity theft, that's free, but it is temporary. But we will, like I said, talk about long-term fraud alerts if you are a victim of identity theft. Okay. So now that you've got the fraud alert on your account, you're going to go to the next step. So step 2 is pull all 3 credit reports. And here's why. In general, the information that is on one of the big 3 credit reports is going to show up on the other 2. They generally have all the same information. However, once in a while, I will see situations where one bureau will have information about an account and the other 2 will not. And so it's worth, when you know or you suspect that you are a victim of identity theft, it's definitely worth pulling all 3 to check across the board to just make sure you've covered your bases, because those are the big 3. That's where the information will show up if it does show up. So check all 3. Some of it, most of it will be redundant, but it's worth checking all 3. The other thing to note is these free credit pulls, these are not the same thing as, you know, how I said before that you get to pull your credit report once per year for free. This is an additional benefit. If you are a victim of identity theft, the bureaus are supposed to allow you to pull your report again for free, no charge to check for identity theft. So if you let them know you're a victim, they should allow you to pull your report for free to check and see and check for the damage, basically. The other thing that's worth doing, so there's actually a couple ways to order your report. I think I had it on my previous slide. You can actually order your report online or by phone or even by mail, because not everybody has access to the internet. But if you order it, especially by mail, ask the bureaus on that order form when you're asking for it to be sent to you by mail. There's actually a little box that they ask where they say, show or only show the last 4 digits of your social. Always circle or check that box. When you're having your report sent to you in the mail, it's always worth having them guard the majority of your number and only show the last 4 digits to avoid additional identity theft issues. Or if you do pull your report online, same thing, you know, because you may want to save it or share their report. Even when I have clients send me their reports to go over together, I always ask them, can you please make sure that you have redacted or blacked out your social so that when you email it to me or send it to me, I don't want that information floating out there for me either. Let me make sure. I have a couple questions in the box that said, I remember in the past I've had clients that needed assistance with a fraud alert and identity theft. Are we still able to assist? Yes, we are still helping folks with these issues. Are we going to provide sample letters to send to credit bureaus? Yes. In the folder of materials that I provided, I have provided sample letters of both letters to send to the bureaus and to creditors. And we're going to talk about that in a little more length in just a second. But yes, thank you for asking. Those materials are provided. Okay, so step 2. So we've got a fraud alert now. Now we've checked all of our accounts, all of our credit reports, and we've circled all of the potential accounts that are erroneous or a result of theft. We take our information, and here's probably the heaviest lift. This is where, if you are helping folks, this is where you will be the most valuable in helping. So you want to submit or collect all of this information into an identity theft report. And what that looks like is first going to the FTC's website and actually drafting an identity theft report through the FTC. I'm going to show you on the next slide what that website looks like, and I will explain what the kind of series of questions you're probably going to see if you're helping somebody fill it out. But you want to go to the FTC's website and fill out that identity theft affidavit, basically. So what will happen is you go onto the website. I have provided it here on the slide. It's going to ask you a series of questions that we'll go over in a second. And then at the end of answering all those questions, it will populate a report for you that you can print or save to your computer. And that is the first piece of your identity theft report that you will need to have to submit to creditors in the bureau. So it's really important to save that report. And then the second thing that you're going to do after going to the FTC website is file a police report about the identity theft. Now, here's where I think there's a little nuance to this work. It used to be that across the board, you had to file a police report in order to be protected under all the federal and state laws out there protecting victims of identity theft. The federal laws that are out there now no longer, for the most part, require a police report. But as you're going to discover in a few slides, I think it's still worth it to completely protect yourself, to give you as many rights as possible. It triggers some extra rights, especially under state law, that is going to help you. So the things that I hear about the police report that I think people struggle with is that they'll call the police department and they can't get someone to investigate, or all they get is a report number. That's fine, as long as you go through the effort of calling. And some police departments, big ones like Oakland, they have online forms where you can, they have a whole portal just for getting that identity theft report number, that case number online. That's sufficient. You just need to go through the step of actually reporting it. Then what you do is you combine that FTC identity theft affidavit with your police report, and that together is your identity theft report. That is the report together that you can send to collections agencies to dispute fraudulent charges or fraudulent accounts. That is the report that you can send to the credit bureaus to dispute accounts. And we're going to talk about what rights you have when you send this packet to these different entities. It triggers certain rights, but it's important to take those two steps. First, going to the FTC website, then making a police report, putting it together and submitting. So those letters that you asked about, those template letters, I did provide in the materials. You don't have to recreate the wheel. You're just writing to the bureaus or writing to the creditor saying, I was a victim, here's my reports, now they have it, and it should trigger your rights. And always keep copies of your paperwork. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, so this is what the FTC website looks like. And I went through this not that long ago. So I wrote down the prompts that they're going to ask, just because I know that some of you might want to know what type of information you're going to have to collect if you're helping someone get through this website. So once you click this little button that says get started, it's very straightforward in my opinion, but everybody's got their own level of technological savvy. So it's going to ask you it's going to prompt you and say, are you a victim of identity theft? Or has someone used an account that's already in your name? Or was there a data breach that you're contacting them about? It's going to ask you kind of what form of identity theft are you facing. Then it will usually prompt you. The next page will ask stuff like, what type of account are we talking about? Is this a debt, a new account, a current account, a credit card, an auto loan? It will try and get more details about the specific debt that you are flagging or the specific account that you were flagging. Or let's say you're a victim of identity theft because someone's using your tax information on a tax return. It has a little button that you can click. So you just follow along to the prompts, answering what form of identity theft you faced. And then what it will do is it will ask for, if it is like a credit account or a new credit card or a bank account, it will ask for the company's name. If you have an account number available that you know of, It will ask for all that contact information. And then at the end, here is, I cannot emphasize how important this is enough. Print out that report. There's a lot of people who go through the effort of populating this whole report and thinking they can come back to it, and it almost always disappears. So the moment that the report is populated, hit print. If the computer is not connected to a printer, still hit print and then print it to an Adobe PDF and save it as a PDF file. It's really, really important. You're going to save this person, whoever you're helping, a lot of time and misery if you make sure to keep and print a copy of that report at the end, because unfortunately, I've seen so many times people go through the effort of making the report, they fail to save it or print it, or they can't remember the password to access it, and it gets lost and they have to start all over. So this is where you can really be helpful to somebody if you're helping them. Okay, so few more things. We're going to talk about legal rights. We went through all the effort to do the fraud alert and to pull our credit report and to do our identity theft report and send it out to the bureaus and send it to the debt collectors. Here's why it's important, legally speaking. There are a lot of consumer rights for victims, and only if you take the necessary steps do those rights get triggered. So it's worth doing. So for example, the first one, the CRAs, meaning the credit reporting agencies, or the big three bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, after they have been properly notified of identity theft, then they're supposed to block reporting of whatever, for example, if it's an account, that's clearly a result of identity theft, or certain charges that are a result of identity theft, they're supposed to remove those items and block it from being reported on your credit report if they've been notified. But if you look at the second bullet point, what that means is proper notification means that you've sent them proof of the identity of the consumer. So usually we include a copy of like a driver's license or a senior ID with a photo, something that shows that the person who's legitimately the victim is who they say they are, a copy of the identity theft report, so that report that you helped assemble, identification of any information this consumer has collected. So if you have proof of any of the billing statements or anything that supports the identity theft report, and a statement from the consumer that the information is not information relating to any transaction by the consumer. So this is where those template letters really come in handy that we do for you, is we write it in the form of this, basically meeting all this criteria, and you just plug in the information of the person you're helping. It has a statement saying, I've never used this account. It's not related to something that I applied for. You know, here's my information. Here's a my copy of my photo ID. I am saying this is my official notification to you, Bureau, that I'm victim. So use those template letters. And once you have sent that letter, then your rights are triggered and they are not supposed to be reporting that information on your credit reports anymore. Secondarily, the bureaus are all supposed to notify debt collectors that information that is disputed, might be a result of identity theft. So they're supposed to let debt collectors know, hey, this information that you have been reporting to us, we think is potentially the result of identity theft. And they're supposed to go and notify those debt collectors. And in turn, the debt collectors who have received this notification from the bureaus, they're not supposed to sell or transfer the debt, place it for collections, or proceed to collect or threaten to sue you for that information, because they know it's a result of identity theft. So it's worth taking the steps to notify, filling and doing your job, because then all of these rights get triggered. All right, I just see a question really quick. Don't identity thefts usually have multiple line items? Does this mean that each line item theft need to be filled in separately on the site? So that's a good question. Typically the letters, so if you see multiple line items, the letters, you can expand it. So you can say, here's my information, here's my identity theft report, and the following items on my report are the result of identity theft. I didn't open these accounts, or I didn't use these accounts, and I just list them out. I usually will identify them, item number 1. Here's all the information about that account and why it's wrong, or that I didn't open it all together. And I would just include it in one letter. The bureaus will then contact those furnishers. You could send it in multiple letters, but it's definitely possible to do all in one letter. Save yourself some time. Okay, here's the other reason why this is important to do, to make the report, to go through the steps, is that not only are debt collectors supposed to not sell the information, keep sending that fraudulent account down the road, but if you provide them written notice that you're a victim, then they're supposed to completely stop collections and make a good faith investigation to determine if it's legitimately a result of identity theft. So the reason why this is important is that we often will get folks who call our office for help where they're being sued on an account that they had no idea was there because they didn't open it. And so it's important to notify the creditors or the debt collectors that you're a victim, because they're supposed to go in and do an investigation and not keep pursuing that debt collection case when you've notified them that you're a victim. And what's more important is the moment you know that a debt collector is doing it, and if you have notified them that you're a victim and they still proceed to try and sue you on those debts or collect on those debts, then you actually have a right to countersue them or do a cross complaint suing them because they're violating your protections as a victim of identity theft. Now, the reason why I'm laying this out like this is because, 1, it's important for you to know that you have protections, but 2, again, some of these protections are only triggered if you take the correct steps. So for example, with the debt collector ceasing collections, that right, in order to trigger that right, you do need to have also done a police report in addition to the FTC affidavit. That's the reason why, even though it's not required under federal law, it's still worth doing a police report in addition to the affidavit, because this law, the state law, is only triggered if you also have a police report. Same thing. So with the cross complaint, you can sue debt collectors who are just plowing forward with collection efforts, even though you've notified them. You want to notify them as quickly and as soon as possible, because some of the rights that you have to sue them require you to first send them information and wait 30 days before you file a claim against them or sue them. So it's kind of a precursor to being able to sue that debt collector if they still move forward. So do your homework, collect the information, notify the creditors, notify the collectors, notify the bureaus, because then you're teeing up your case if you need to take it as far as litigation. And this is the type of stuff you can come to our office and get some extra support and help. But if you can do a lot of the work ahead of time, like the reports and police reports and affidavits and that kind of stuff, once you get to our office, it's much easier for us to help you and get you a faster resolution. I see a question here. It asks about Experian requiring date of birth and social security numbers to access the account. How do we ensure that we're signing in with this information is safe? It's an excellent question. Yes, the bureaus, this is one of the few times where the bureaus, you will be asked for your full social. This is why I recommend an annualcreditreport.com and not any other credit site, is because annualcreditreport.com is the one that's approved by the FTC. That's the one that they're actually saying, yep, this is legitimate. If you go on that one, then yes, you will be asked for your social, your date of birth, your current address, and then usually they send either a verification code to a phone or an email, or they'll ask you verification questions. Back in the day, it used to be stuff like you have to answer 5 questions, and it was ask things like, it looks like you opened a credit account in October of 2020. Which company was that account with? And you would have to identify which creditor you open an account. They're trying to decide or figure out if it's legitimately you who's trying to pull your credit report. But that's a good question. Yes, you do provide your full social for pulling it, but that's why I have given you the specific site to use. Okay, we're almost there. everybody. Hang in. So I had mentioned the extended fraud alert. We had talked about this. So at the beginning, the first step is alerting, getting that temporary alert with the bureaus to just try and stop the bleeding while you get your ducks in a row to do the police report and the affidavit. But after the fact, once you've done all of that and now you're cleaning up issues of identity theft, you can actually take that report, the police report and the FTC affidavit, sending that to the credit bureaus using a template letter that we've provided. And that should allow you to get a 7-year fraud alert on your credit report, meaning that for the next 7 years, it's alerting creditors to be careful because this person has a legitimate history where they've been a victim of identity theft. So you really need to pay attention, creditors. So that's the way to do it, is that it kind of brings you full circle. You do the temporary one and the reports, and you send out all the letters, and then you let the bureaus know in that letter, I want an extended fraud alert, and here's my report. And that entitles you to have that extended alert on your file for the 7 years. Okay, last slide, and it's just a reminder, and we've talked about a lot of this. And before I go through this slide, let me just say, we're all going to do these steps, and we're going to stay vigilant, and we're going to pay attention. But the reality is, we live in an interconnected world. Our information is everywhere, and it's pretty much impossible to completely protect yourself from being a victim. So while we're going to do these steps and we're going to pay attention, just know you have protections. It's more important to know how to clean up issues of identity theft or scams than to think that you're going to be able to completely protect yourself, because things are always evolving. Scams are always going to happen, and our information is so freely available these days, it's almost impossible. So just keep that in mind. So to the best of your ability to limit the damage, protect your personal information. Lock your financial records at home or where you can. Limit what you carry. Oh goodness, I can't tell you how many clients I have who carry their social security card in their purse or in their wallet. Please don't do that. Please encourage people you know not to do that. Shred sensitive information, account statements you don't need, anything with your social or identifying information on that you don't want floating out there, shred it if you don't need that document. Don't share personal information. Protect your mobile devices. Leaving computers just to run to the restroom while you're at a coffee shop. That is just a prime way for someone to steal your information. Be careful who you're leaving your devices with or where you're leaving your phones. Don't open strange links from strangers or files. Like I told you about my email trick. Pay attention to what you are opening and who you're opening it from. If you're getting rid of old computers, get them wiped clean. Make sure they are wiped clean, and make sure if you are hiring someone to wipe your computer clean, make sure you trust that individual or company that they're going to do it properly. Use safe Wi-Fi passwords and encrypt your data if you're sending information. So because I'm an attorney and I'm constantly dealing with banks, I usually will send information. If I have to relay information to banks, for example, I will encrypt PDFs where it's password encoded, and I will not send that password information in the same email. I have to send follow-up emails. Things that you can do to create layers, create steps, prevent scammers from having easy access to your information is very helpful. And check your mail. Open your billing statements. I know it's tedious. I know we don't want to do it, but it's really important. Review your credit card statements, your bank statements. You never know what you're going to find in those things. And if you're doing that and you do flag something, for example, in a bank statement or a credit card statement, immediately notify the credit card company, the banking service, the PG&E company, anything, wherever you're getting the information, alert them right away. Because what you will realize is that most credit card companies, banks, credit unions, they usually have policies that the faster you alert them From the moment you discover the issue, the faster you alert them, the more protections you have. If you wait too long to do it, the less protections you have, or maybe you have to pay a certain fee. Maybe you're responsible for the first $50 that were stolen, and then they'll cover the rest. So it's just worth being very proactive in these circumstances. Okay, a couple questions about sharing the slides. Thank you. We are going to share them. I'm going to go through. So this last slide is just to let you know how to contact HERA, our legal nonprofit. The contact information is at the bottom of the slide. Like I said, we do all sorts of consumer services, and all of our services are free. The only thing we charge for on a sliding scale is our estate planning. But if you're very low income, then we do that stuff either for free or for very low cost. Everything else, debt collection, credit reporting, identity theft reports, anything we've talked about today, that is all free. Okay, with that, I'm going to scroll through the questions and try and answer any of them that I missed. So bear with me. Let me make sure that I'm getting to everybody's questions. Or if you know you asked a question I did not answer, you can drop it in the chat or even raise your hand since we're at the end. Or if you want to share scams that you've heard about, you want to flag for folks, now is the time to share. Okay. Someone asked about, is it true that iPhone and Android are often locked so your personal data is hard to get? I'm not 100% certain if this question is about if, for example, your phone is stolen, or, for example, when people pass away, if someone can access your data. There's a couple different ways I could see this playing out. So one, if you lock your phone, yes, it's a lot harder to get your information. I strongly recommend, if you have a phone, that you have a passcode in order to get on your mobile device. But in terms of data, yes. There are, for example, if you pass away, the information on your mobile device is protected, and it is very difficult for somebody to get access unless, for example, you have left a legacy contact or you have given them permission through estate planning in order to have access to your data after you have passed. But yes, they are supposed to be protecting your information after you pass. Someone had asked, I would like to know more about bank fraud. Lots of stories about banks not honoring the FDIC protections due to some loophole to not replace consumer funds. So I think we see this a lot, and probably where this is coming from is you may have all seen a lot of reports about, for example, Zelle, or a lot of those apps where you can easily pay for services, send money through the app. For a long time, it was unclear whether or not services like Zelle were covered under the same rules that protected those funds. So if a scammer got access to your account or charged up on your Zelle account, there was a question mark as to whether or not those were protected like a bank account would be protected. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau realized that that was a really serious loophole, as we call it, or that you flagged. And they have made some official statements now that they are overseeing it, and they are making efforts to also cover those kind of new apps, because the issue is things are always developing. New financial services are always being created, and the law, sometimes it's hard. It's not drafted in a way that clearly covers certain products. So it takes the FTC or the CFPB to identify those issues and then acknowledge, yes, this is within our jurisdiction, this is under our control, and we are going to be monitoring and handling it in this way. So those services are now being handled more. But unfortunately, there are certain services that aren't covered, and it's why it's worth making reports to the FTC, making complaints to the CFPB to try and get them to do something about it. I think I answered, let's see. I think I answered most of the ones that happened during the presentation. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Let's see. Someone said there was a misunderstanding with the previous question. I was asking about the initial FTC identity theft filing process. Also, I missed your email trick. So the initial FTC identity theft filing process, I don't know. Deborah, if you're still on and still paying attention, can you
Yeah.
unmute yourself and let me know what you meant by that?
Yeah. So, you said that when you're filing, um, the initial, um, FTC identity theft, that it asks you that they're pretty, specific, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It asks you, was it a bank account
Oh,
or so do you have, and given that they could be multiple, do you file different ones for each one if they are multiple?
yeah, thank you for clarifying. So the last time I've did that report, it allows you to click multiples on that one report and do it all in one affidavit. If it doesn't, then yes, but the last time I did it, I was able to click multiple issues within one report, which is why it's worth checking out the website. It'll let you prompt through most of them. You can do hypothetical cases if you just want to see what the website looks like, but it usually does let you do multiples in one. Thank you for asking that clarification question.
Thank
And
you.
then you had asked about the email trick. So I often get phishing emails, and almost all the time there's someone pretending to be from Amazon, probably because they know everybody's got an Amazon account these days, or very few don't. And so it will say something like, there's an issue with your Amazon account, or a credit card was rejected associated with your Amazon account. And so what I do is, because scammers often have a way to make the email, when you initially look at it in your inbox, it will look like it's from the company you recognize. It will say Amazon services. But if you open the email and you click the forward button, the forwarded email, it will actually tell you the specific email address that it came from. And that almost always shows that it was from a scammer, because a legitimate Amazon email is going to come from Amazon. It's not going to come from XY1Z Serena at, sorry if anybody's named Serena here today, at something.com. It helps you identify if you're not sure if an email is legitimate or not. I like to click the forward button because it will show me the full email where it actually came from. And a lot of times I can see that it's a scammer, and I will report those to Amazon because they have a way that you can report scammer emails that pretend to be from them. I see someone who said, can we do a legacy through a phone carrier? So I have only seen this. I don't have an Android, so I can't answer this. I think you can let your phone provider know, but I have seen this more in the context of, for those of you who have Apple iPhones, that on your iPhone in the settings section, there's actually a way to set a legacy contact on your iPhone. A good Google search or YouTube and tutorial is the way to go. But there are ways on an iPhone that you can set a legacy contact on iPhone. Okay, if I missed anybody's questions, I think I got through them all. Last chance, please drop any lingering questions in the chat. Otherwise, thank you for spending the morning with me talking about scams. I know that this is probably not the cheeriest way to start your day, but I enjoyed talking about it with you and seeing all your questions. And if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. My contact information, I'm pretty confident, gets shared with all of these slides and all this information. And, also let us know in our feedback if there's additional information about this stuff that you want to know. We're happy to provide those services, or call our main intake line and connect us with folks that you're trying to help, or for yourselves, because we're all in it together. And I have seen it both for myself and for many, many clients. So thank you everybody for paying attention and for participating today.